Hey everyone, it is Tuesday again, which means we are back in the kitchen cooking with Evie. And today we are going to be making a butternut squash and sweet potato hash. Perfect food for this time of year, right? Squash is in season, we've got sweet potatoes all over. And the way this recipe came about, a little bit of history, in my 10-day sugar cleanse, we were talking about foods that are naturally sweet because we were looking for ways to calm our sugar cravings without reaching for typical sweets with added sugars like candies or cakes. And it turns out that there are vegetables that are naturally sweet, one of which is butternut squash and the other sweet potato. So we're combining both of these very sweet vegetables into a nice sweet dish for today. So before I get started, if you do like these recipes, but you're not quite sure how to incorporate or how to prepare foods to have them ready for the week, I am doing a Prep It and Forget It program. It starts November 29th. That's the Sunday after Thanksgiving. And we will be making a full week's menu on Sunday afternoon from 2 to 4 p.m. Central. So if you are interested in learning how to do this, want to hone up on your prepping skills, this is a great way to do it. I put the link in the chat box. Just click on that and you'll get the recipes that we'll be making, you'll get the information and how to register. So let's get started. First thing you want to do, hash typically is made with white potatoes, but I like to stay away from white potatoes. I like to use sweet potatoes instead because they contain more color, more antioxidants than than white potatoes. Their glycemic index is low, which is one of those things about vegetables that's nice to know, that even though they're sweet, unlike foods with processed sugars in them, they have a lot of fiber, which helps bind up that sugar and prevents those mood swings that you get if you're eating foods that have added sugars in them. So I just did a rough chop of the onions here. I'm going to give it a little bit more, and I'm going to heat up my pan. Now I like to use for this a cast iron skillet because it browns the potatoes so nicely. And in this case it'll brown both of the potatoes and the butternut squash. So I'm going to wait for that to heat up. The trick to keeping these from sticking in your pan is to heat the pan up first, add the oil, let that heat up a bit, and then add in the food that you are cooking. So we're going to give it a minute for the skillet to heat up. And as that is going, while that's heating up, I'm just going to start prepping. Notice I said prepping. Very key. Remember that upcoming program? And I should have showed you butternut squash. This is an unusual looking butternut squash. Usually the neck of it, this is the neck of it here, is a lot larger, a lot bigger. But this is what I got in my CSA box this week, so that's what we're going to use. And I am just going to chop it into little ribbons and remove the, yes, this is a lot smaller than they usually are. Usually they're a lot more stable than this. I'm just going to remove the skin from the outside. Let's check on that pan. Pan is nice and hot. I'm going to add in a good generous amount of olive oil. I'm going to add in probably about 2 tablespoons, and I'm going to let that heat up a second. Just adjusted my camera a little bit. All right, so I'm going to continue to remove that outer skin of my squash. And just go around soon as I'm done with this one, I'm going to add my onions into the skillet. I have it on about a medium heat right now. I'm going to, let's see, I have it actually on high. I'm going to turn it down to medium right away because I don't want it to get too hot. Probably let that go a little bit longer than what I like. It's smoking a little bit, but not too bad. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in my onions to my pan. You can hear that. That's nice and hot. I don't know if you can hear that sizzle. All right. So I have this turned down now to about medium heat. And I'm just going to let that soften. And while that's going, I'm going to put my butternut squash to the side because one of the wonderful ingredients of this recipe is bacon. And I actually found this bacon Trader Joe's. No sugar, it's not cured, it's a dry rub, uncured bacon, it says. I'm going to take 2 slices of this now. And I want to chop this up into small pieces. Little trick. I'm going to use some scissors. I use these as my kitchen scissors and literally just cut them into slices here, into ribbons. Rather than chopping it, this gives you nice, quick, straight cuts. I might go through sideways and just give another cut so that everything is a nice small size. I'm going to throw that in with my bacon, with my onion. Give them a stir, and then I'm going to let them cook on this lower heat for probably about 5 minutes. Let you see what's going on here. All right. We're going to let that cook a little bit. I'm going to get back to that butternut squash. Now, you can use a peeler to do the same thing I'm doing here, just like this. I just find it quicker and easier usually to use the knife. But same effect. And I'm just going to show you a little bit. Now, this bulb of the squash, if you've never cooked with zucchini squash, butternut squash before, is where the seeds are. What I like to do is save those seeds. I have a little jar here with some of the seeds from my earlier recipe that I made. What I like to do is take my ice cream scoop. It's about the only reason I use an ice cream scoop these days because I don't eat dairy anymore. And I just will go in and scoop out those seeds. These are tiny little ones. Oh my goodness. I guess a tiny squash has tiny seeds. Compared to the butternut squash that I opened earlier today. So I'm just going to put that in my little bowl here. And then what I will do is later on, I'll go back and clear away the meat from the seeds and I'll roast them. It's delicious. Just like if you've ever had roasted pumpkin seeds, it's exactly the same. I like to put a little bit of olive oil on, some salt and cinnamon. Yum, delicious. Our bacon is cooking up nicely here. I turned it down just a little, so I have a little bit of time here to work on the squash. I'm actually going to use this peeler because this squash, if you notice, there's really not that much flesh to it. So this will take off less of the outer covering than if I used a knife. Just another way to do it. I would say do whatever works for you. All right. I've got one more quarter here, and I'm going to peel that down. You can see it comes off pretty easily. The smaller squash seems to have a thinner skin, and it does seem to peel easier than if you have a bigger skin. And I would say if you have a larger squash that you're working with, I would say this is about 1 pound. I'm going to use about 1 pound of squash, and I'm going to try to get a ratio of that 2 amounts of squash to my sweet potato. So I'm only going to use a half of this sweet potato. And I'm not going to skin it. I like to keep the peel on because that's where a lot of the nutrition and a lot of the fiber lies. So I'm going to just work with this here. And today what I'm going to do, now you can prepare this squash or your hash a couple of different ways. You can do it in cubes, in which case I would just take the squash that I have here. Let's see, it's not a very big piece of squash, so it doesn't make it for a good demo, but I would go through this way, turn it around, almost like making matchsticks here, and then turn them sideways and cut them like so. So you could potentially, if you want your hash to be cubed, work with it this way. However, for today what we're going to do is we're going to shred it in a food processor. And I happen to just have one right here. Who knew? Okay, I'm going to be using my shredding blade, and I'm using the thicker openings. So there's small and larger shred. I'm going to be doing the large shred. And what I'm going to do then is I'm going to lay my pieces in sideways here. And then just shred them down. I'm going to do them all and then I'll show it to you. Let me cut the bottom off of this squash here. I'm going to cut this down so that it fits into my shoot here. But you can see how nice and quick this is then to shred all of your vegetables. Cut the back end of this off as well. Oops, come back. Oh, I have to show you this bacon in a minute. Let me finish this. Let's see if it lets me. No, I need to make this a little smaller. You'll find that if you don't allow for your plunger to go down far enough, the machine won't work. All right, so a couple things to show you here. Take my blade out. Here is my shredded sweet potato and butternut squash. Let me then just remove this because we don't need it anymore. All right. Let me say hi to Pat. Hey Pat, how are you? I'm so glad you joined me today. Wonderful. Yes, you found us. Wonderful. All right, so let me show you what we have here in our pan. Can you see how nice that looks? Oh, and it smells delicious. I like to get the bacon that is not cured because it is just better for us, no chemicals in it. I liked that this bacon was also, they said it's in crate free. So it looks like a little bit more humane practices, which is always an added benefit. So, before we move on to adding our vegetables into our pan, I just wanted to mention too, if you don't have time or the inclination to want to chop up your squash, you can get it frozen. You can find frozen chopped squash as well. Quick, easy, right into the pan. So, I would do it frozen, so I would do it to this point right here, open up the bag, and then put the frozen in and continue the process. So lettuce now, I'm going to add in about a clove of garlic. I minced up a clove of garlic ahead of time, just to save a little bit of time. There's always little prepping tips that work really well. Having pre-chopped garlic is one. I do get the minced garlic, so it's nice and easy if I'm in the middle of things. It doesn't have as strong a flavor as a fresh clove of garlic, but in a pinch, it's kind of nice to have that. Having things pre-prepped, having them pre-made. Like I could have had this pre-chopped at the beginning of the week and just been able to add it to my onions right now. So talking about prepping, remember we have our Prep It and Forget It program coming up, and you'll learn some of these tips as we go through. So November 29th, the link is in the chat box there. Okay, so I'm now going to add our shredded vegetables to our pan. I'm going to turn the heat back on, because I did turn it off for a little bit. And I'm just going to add, it's a full pan of veggies. Let me show you what we've got. Just so you can see how full that is. All right. So I'm going to turn up the heat to medium now. I'm going to add in a little salt and pepper. I'm just going to give it a sprinkle of thyme. Here, I'll bring it over so that we can see. I'm going to give it a sprinkle of thyme, just like that over the top. I'm going to give it a few chili flakes, red pepper flakes rather. I don't tend to like things really spicy, so I mean a little pinch goes a long way for me. A little bit of crushed pepper. Black pepper. And a couple pinches of salt like that. All right, let's get that back onto the stove where it can cook. Now, what I like to do right here is I'm going to mix this in a little bit, get those seasonings into the vegetables, and I'm going to put a lid on it. Let's see where my lid is. There it is. I'm going to put a lid on it, and I'm going to turn it down onto medium-low. And I'm going to let that go for 5 minutes. What's that doing now? It's browning the bottom and keeping the top nice and hot, so it's also cooking along with. So everything's kind of getting evenly cooked. When I go in, I'm going to stir it up. I'm going to get those brown bits up, and I could even turn it. But I find with this one that just kind of stirring it in, it doesn't have the, unless you use a ton of oil, it's not going to have that crust on the bottom so that it's going to turn over. But a little trick, if you do want it to be a little bit crispier, one trick is to actually soak the shredded sweet potatoes in water for a little while, because it gets some of these starches off of it, and that keeps the everything from sticking together. So what you would do is you would soak it, rinse it a few times, and then really squeeze it out. Sometimes you could use like a dish towel to wring it out. I actually have like a little bag, a produce storage bag, that I could do the same thing with. I would have put it in here, rinsed it, and then literally squeezed out the excess liquid. And that supposedly makes it less stick together, more crunchy. But just a preference. I've done it both ways, and I haven't seen really a big difference here. Maybe it makes more of a difference with white potatoes. So that then cooks for 5 minutes, as I said. So given our time, I thought I would make one up ahead of time. Look, it shrank. my small skillet here. Again, it is a cast iron skillet. But this is what I made up earlier this morning. I'm going to come around so you can see it better. Here we go. There you have it. And you can see that it has some of the brown bits in it. What I did was I stirred it up and let it keep cooking. It did cook down. It'll cook down. This one will cook down to about half its size almost when it's done and ready. But something like this, so nice for a breakfast. You could even present it like this. You could put a fried egg on top, put the lid on, and cook that until the egg is cooked. If you have a big pot like this, you could put 3 or 4 fried eggs on top and let that cook. They might come out a little bit more poached unless you dig a hole. Have you ever heard of it, like an egg in a basket? Sometimes is what they call it. So that's another way to serve this. But what we can do for today is just take a plate. And serve it up. Now, this has been sitting for a while, so the bottom is not crispy. I transferred it in to reheat it, so it doesn't have that crispy bottom to it, but this one over here will. A nice way to serve this up is just to chop some chives on top, or in this case, I've got some fresh parsley, so I'm going to just sprinkle a little bit of that on top. Move some of these things out of the way. You can put some in our pan. How's that? There we go. And here we have our finished hash. Let's see. I just got rid of my fork that I was going to use. Okay, I'm just going to try it. Now remember, we have that bacon in it, which is such a nice flavor. The squash and the sweet potato are nice and soft. I've got a little bit of kick because of those red pepper flakes. And some good crunchy brownness. So that's it. That is our butternut squash and sweet potato hash. I'm going to enjoy this for breakfast tomorrow, or maybe lunch, or maybe dinner. It could be used for all 3 meals. And speaking of having meals ready for me, I just wanted to remind you that that Prep It and Forget It program starts November 29th, which is a Sunday. We'll be cooking from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock p.m. Central, making all the dishes for the following week. So it's the week right after Thanksgiving. So it'll be really nice just to have that week not to be cooking all week, right? And the fun part is we'll be cooking through Zoom. We'll all be cooking together. You'll get your recipe, you'll get your menu plan, you'll get everything that you need to be there, be ready. You'll have a shopping list and a prep guide. So in case you can't make it with me, you can do it on your own. The link is in the chat box. Please click on it. You'll get to look at the list of all of the recipes that we'll be making and a way to sign up. So I hope you get to join me. In the meantime, I hope you enjoy your sweet potato hash. If you enjoy these recipes, I have other recipes similar to this on my webpage. You can just go to eveyschweig.com and look under the recipe tab, and you'll find it there. So until next week, stay well, stay happy, and eat well. And I'll see you then. Take care now. Bye-bye.